What's up, everybody? David Yang here again with another episode of Real Talk, where I talk about real estate. In this episode, we're going to be talking about everybody's third favorite topic, rent control, okay? Specifically, what's going on with it and what's going on with the rent control in St. Paul. Now, before we get started, if you could do me a big favor by smashing that thumbs up button below and subscribing, that would help out the YouTube algorithm in helping this video reach other people that might need this information as well. Okay, so what is rent control? Now, I made a few videos about rent control already, so I'm not going to go too in depth of what rent control is. Basically, what rent control is, it's where the government tells landlords, hey, this is what you can charge for rent, okay? Now, if you remember, here in St. Paul, last November, the city passed a rent control ordinance. They called it rent stabilization. Okay, so what the rent stabilization ordinance set out to do was to cap rents at 3% per year. Okay, and that's across the board, and there was no exceptions. No matter if you are a landlord that just built your property, so new construction, or if you had any major capital expenditures, or if you are going through high inflation, it doesn't matter, okay? Landlords, they're all capped at 3%, okay? So that's what kind of the language was as it was written when it was passed, okay? Now, the ordinance just went into effect this year, and as soon as it passed and went into effect, what did we see? We saw builders just completely stop, or they announced that they were halting all of their projects, okay? Now, that was bad, all right? The mayor came out and said, hey, he wants to keep the projects going. What can he do? He wants to get exemptions for new constructions. Why did he do that? Is because he knows that he needs new housing to be developed, okay? So stopping the new housing from developed, that's going to hurt more than, the 3% rent cap. Now, on the flip side of that, what do we see on the landlord side, okay? We saw landlords scrambling to raise rents before the ordinance went into effect. So how did that affect renters? You see renters that haven't had their leases or their rents raised in 2-3 years. Now the landlords all of a sudden are raising their rents as fast as possible before the ordinance went into effect, okay? So I myself, hadn't raised rents on some tenants for years. And I had to raise my rents as well, because now if I didn't do that, then I potentially would never have a chance to catch up. Because another section in the ordinance said that it doesn't matter where your rents are currently at. Once the ordinance goes into effect, then you're locked in, okay? So you can only go 3% from where it was currently locked in when the ordinance went into effect. So if you're a landlord, and let's just say you had a super great tenant and you haven't raised their rents for a long time because they take care of the property and all that stuff, well, now if you don't raise rents, then every year you can only raise it 3%, all right? And when the tenant moves out, you still can't raise it up to market rates. You can only keep it at 3%. So essentially, you will fall behind on your cash flow in comparison to, let's just say, inflation. So if inflation is running at 8.5%, 9%, and you can only raise it 3%, then you're going to be super negative, okay? And also, you look at property taxes. Some people's property taxes went up 15%, okay? They didn't put a cap on that. So putting a cap on rental prices, it's not going to help, okay? Now, I understand that renters are going to not like what I have to say, but I used to be a renter, okay? I used to be low-income renter. My family were low-income renters. Now I'm a landlord, okay? So I see both sides of the coin. I'm actually not for or against rent stabilization, okay? I want fair and equitable, affordable housing for everybody, okay? But we need to understand that how we solve this is more from an economical standpoint than from a regulatory standpoint, okay? Now, don't get me wrong, regulations are still needed to make sure that people are protected, but what we need to do is we need to figure out why did we have such high rents, or why are we scared of high rents in the first place. It's because of supply and demand, okay? There's a very low supply of rental properties in St. Paul, okay? And there's very high demand, okay? And this is the similar story across the nation, okay? Because a lot of other cities and towns, they're looking at, implementing their own types of rent caps. Now, going back to the one that St. Paul passed, that was the strictest in the nation when they passed it, okay? But what happened recently in the last week to 2 weeks, the city council has just amended the ordinance, okay? So now they're saying that they want to give new construction a waiver for the 3% rent cap, and when tenants move out, landlords can raise the rents. I believe it's up to a certain amount, but it's over the 3%, roughly around 8% plus inflation, okay? So I'm not exactly 100% sure on the numbers, but what that will allow is it will allow the landlord to kind of bring it up to market rents if it's not at market rents when the tenant moves out, okay? Now, I believe the language is still getting worked out, so if you want to find out exactly what the language says, I would suggest calling the city of St. Paul or going to their website to find out the latest news on that, okay? So, going back to how we fix this, all right? Personally, this is just my opinion. I think how we fix this is from a supply side issue, okay? And what does that mean? Is we need to create more rental housing. Landlords, they're not afraid of rent caps. Rent caps help landlords, okay? Think about what I just said, all right? Before the ordinance went into effect, landlords were racing to raise their rents, okay? So now they have raised all their rents, all right? Well, the rent cap went into effect. They're not going to be lowering their rents because of the rent cap, okay? So how you force landlords to lower their rents is you create more rentals, all right? You create more supply. There's more supply of something, then generally the cost of that item or commodity or rental property will come down, okay? Because there's more competition, okay? Landlords are afraid of more competition. That's what they're afraid of. They're not afraid of the government putting in more government regulation. More government regulation helps landlords, okay? I don't care, what people say, in the end, it helps landlords, all right? So if you want renters to have more affordable housing, create more rental properties, okay? I've been asked questions, so how do we do that, right? I don't have all the answers, all right? Now, one thing I do suggest is maybe let's put in a program to help more landlords enter the market, okay? Because if more landlords enter the market, there's going to be more competition. There's going to be more rental properties. That's going to lower the cost of rentals, okay? Now, that's just my thought. There could be so many other ways to fix this issue, but that's just my thought. And again, I might not even be right. I'm just a guy on YouTube just talking about what he thinks about, okay? And, from my perspective, I think if we fix the supply issue and we bring demand in line with supply, that should bring affordability down, okay? Or that should bring affordability closer to where people can actually get into properties. Now, that was a really, I would say, mild spiel about rent control, okay? If you have any questions about it, go ahead and message me or contact the city of St. Paul if you have specific questions about rent control from them, or contact your own city if you're not in St. Paul. If your city is thinking about rent control, contact them, get information about it. If you're a renter, make sure that you're voting for something that is going to benefit you and not going to hurt you in the long run, okay? So you got to be kind of financially smart about what you're voting for, because November 8th is coming up, and I think in some jurisdictions, some cities, some states, they're going to be talking about rent control, okay? So again, if you have questions about it, leave a comment in the section below. I want to know what you think about rent control, okay? Is it good? Is it bad? Do you hate me for talking about it? So yeah, let me know your thoughts, okay? If you don't have anything else for me, then I will see you guys next week on the next episode of Real Talk.